Just listen, Kinley, Yinka. Chioma, you're welcome to the show. And what we
I don't know. I mean, have we formally introduced our new tear rubber chairperson of the Abuja Branch of International Federation of Female Lawyers? Chioma, many thanks and congratulations on the election.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Well done. And prior to that, you've done a lot of work, you know, talking about women's rights as human rights. You were the chair on the Human Rights Committee, I think 2020 to 2022, and a lot of conversation on what really, you know, do women want come up. Is it in politics? Is it in education? Is it in work placement? The ideal to really demand that need is something I would want you to probably explain better, because I know that on the United Nations Human Rights Day, and I think I'll take this quote, it said women's rights are human rights. They include the right to live free from violence, discrimination, to enjoy the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, to be educated, to own property, to vote, and to earn equal wage. And then they went further to say there shall be no restrictions on the eligibility of men and women to participate in every capacity. And that was just the ideal. But we are in Africa. This is Nigeria. I do not know if we exemplify in true sense these narratives here for us.
I think everybody can easily respond to that question by telling us that we're not. And that, of course, stems again from our socialization. The patriarchal nature of our society is such that once you talk women's rights, just the mention of it alone, you're perceived as a rebel. You're perceived as, you know, you're already an agitator. You're aggressive. You're perceived as the one who wants to bring on a fight. But we forget that when we talk women's rights, we're not talking about anything novel in the sense of it. Women are primarily human. But the reason why the need to have that conversation is there is because over the years, from our traditional society to now, women have been in a vulnerable state where they're relegated, you know, as subpar, you know, citizens,
yes.
You know, as if they are second fiddle. When in fact, while it may be understandable from our trajectory, from our history, because of the importance of might at the time, in the Stone Age where might was power, it's no longer the case. Yet, that narrative, which has been carefully sewn into our religious beliefs, into our cultural beliefs, into our socializations generally, continues to persist in ways that put women at gross disadvantages, regardless the exploits many of them make the effort to make in their individual lives, in their careers, in the society, in leadership, and in many other, you know, fronts. Yet, the mere fact that they are women, they are still loosely perceived as chattels, to be owned by the men, to be held only at the discretion of the men, to be permitted to exist, to be permitted to aspire. You know, it's as if a woman needs to obtain some permission before she can even aspire to the things that should ordinarily be her entitlement on the basis of just being human. And these disadvantages are skewed all around, not just, okay, so we're talking about this now, we're in the urban areas. Most of our listeners will be educated people. What happens to even those, because when we talk about these inequalities, the intersections vary. When the earlier speaker spoke,
Yinka,
yes, he spoke about the groups, even within those demographics of disabilities. The same thing applies even when you talk about women suffering inequalities. You still find what's happening to our sisters from the north, particularly in the conflict-torn areas. What's happening to the women in the rural areas, most of whom are not even literate to understand these conversations and to articulate their aspirations. What happens to the women who also suffer, you know, disabilities of various forms, whether physical or otherwise?
So this is a great place to jump in, because this question, I will put it back to you, because the International Federation of Female Lawyers, women lawyers, is sectioned across Nigeria. They
Yes.
have charters across Nigeria.
Yes.
And I believe that there are conversations that are often domesticated. In your recent Law Week, you had conversations around insecurity
Yes.
and the role of empowerment for women. And this speaks to this particular scenario that you're talking about. So how does this also become a charter of demands, or perhaps a place to have conversations within your federation to domesticate these issues at the local level?
Well, we already know that. Let's use an easy statute like the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which is one of those laws that seeks to protect persons, of course, with great emphasis on women because of this conversation, you know, both in domestic and public spaces. Now, we have most states of the Federation having enacted that law in their different states,
True.
since the VAP Act is only effective in the FCT. Now, while that be the case, it goes beyond just enacting these laws. We need to get to the point where there is even a good understanding of the principles of violence. Sometimes people still don't understand that violence is a broad spectrum conversation, that it goes beyond just the physical conversations that people have about it. They need to begin to look at the economic implications of violence, or the economic dimensions of violence. Look at the verbal, the psychological, and all of those. Now, as this happens, there needs to be continued conversations to drive and deepen awareness, even amongst the legal community. I apologize to say this, but there is still a very poor understanding of what that act is about, or even what the conversations around violence is. Much more for the ordinarily people, the unlearned, as it were. Now, as this happens, we need to also have the right kind of people who will continue to advance the right arguments for us on the policy tables. Those who don't wear the shoes will rarely understand it. How many women do we have in those corridors? How many women do we have on those tables? How many people who are sensitive to these issues and who can look at them from those necessary lenses do we have there? They are very few and far in between. And even when they are there, maybe because of the demographics they represent, they are not able to, boldly, courageously, and sternly stand for what needs to be stood for. And then the rest of yes, you spoke about what FIDA, how FIDA can be advancing these conversations. Yes, we have FIDA, we have 46 branches in the 36 states. So this helps take it closer to the grassroots in the different states, where they're able to, articulate these issues with the peculiarities of their situations, of their circumstances, depending on what obtains in those states. As this happens, we are able to bring in more women from the rural areas. But beyond just FIDA, this should, the effect should widen. It shouldn't just be FIDA advancing it. I like that FIDA is taking a very bold, step in championing it, but more hands need to be on deck.
Okay, perhaps we'll bring Yinka into this. From what you said and what Chioma said, I see a lot of similarities in the plight, that you both face. But what